when we look at the positives for Max and for Red Bull again, Bernie, it wasn't the 34 seconds that he was behind the race winner Oscar Piastri in Bahrain. It was 2.8 seconds this time around. So for them, it seemed to be a track that once again showed if there's a lack of degradation and a lack of medium speed corners, then that Red Bull is almost a match, if not a parity, would you say, with McLaren?
Everyone's talking McLaren, but Max Verstappen just reminded us who runs F1. Check this video out.
Yeah, it was really close. If you look at qualifying, I guess is normally the best read. If if Oscar got everything out of it, I think the car could have been a little bit quicker. Max having two goes at the end of Q3 definitely meant that, he was absolutely in the best place. And I think that was really, really well played from Red Bull's side to post the red flag in Q3, get the two runs done, do the pit stop. That's very abnormal for qualifying. It was a bit lucky, I guess, in where Max was on track when the red flag hit that he hadn't used that soft tyre, so it was still good to have a run. So there's a bit of luck in there from Max's side, but they reacted to it really well. You need to do that. So I think the cars were close in qualifying. I wonder in the race, despite there not being the big gap, like you say, Max obviously haven't had the longer pit stop, the 5 second penalty. Oscar seemed, I think at the end, Oscar did a really fast lap. I think there was more pace in that McLaren, and Oscar was just doing what he needed to do to get the win, make sure everything was safe, make sure he wasn't going to fall off a cliff in degradation. There was no need to take the risk. So he was managing, I think there was quite a bit of management going on through Jeddah. So I'd love to have seen a flat out race from Oscar, see what the gap could have been, if if the points were awarded based on the gap between P1 and P2, it would have been lovely to see where he ended up, something silly like that. But yeah, I think that the track clearly suits Max and the deck was low. So I think it'd be lovely to see where Oscar finished if he was really pushing that car. I think there was more pace in that McLaren. I think that we've seen that from a few cars down the field that really pushed in the final laps of the Grand Prix. So yeah, I think that there was more in it, but definitely the track suited Red Bull a bit better than what Bahrain had. Definitely. Is that down to Deg? Is it down to the different tyres? We don't quite know, but Max certainly was closer than I expected, at least, yeah.
Isn't it telling that even with a 5 second penalty and compromised strategy, Max was still within 3 seconds of the win? What does that say about the raw pace and adaptability of both him and Red Bull under pressure? This weekend proved that even when McLaren shines, Max is always lurking, executing at a level that forces others to play safe. The fact he closed a 34-second deficit to just under 3 says everything about Red Bull's trajectory.
Just talking to some of the Red Bull folks under the podium, we were reflecting on why they were more competitive here rather than Bahrain, and they kind of think it's like Japan. You've got more fast-flowing corners in terms of layout rather than the stop-start, slower corners of Bahrain. And they feel like the car is a bit more competitive there. It's obviously a much less abrasive surface than Bahrain. Japan, with the new surface as well, was very grippy. So we're starting to get a picture, aren't we? We think that when the temperatures are high, like we're going to see in Miami, the McLaren is stronger and is able to look after its tires, be kinder to its tires. So we think that's where it's coming. But I liked the fact that right at the end of the race, Bernie, you alluded to that, the fastest lap. Oscar did his best lap right at the end. Max did his on the penultimate lap. 132.22 for Oscar, 132.28, I think, for Max. 600s between them. They were really pushing on, and the quality of driving up at the front in that first stint as well. I think it surprised McLaren and Oscar just how quick Max was on that first stint. And in the dirty air, he was struggling to stay with him. So, yeah, the Red Bull was genuinely a very, very fast car this weekend. It wasn't just the one lap in quali. It was genuinely a fast car, in Verstappen's case, at least, in the race as well. We didn't get to see Yuki, of course, after the crash.
No, but picking up on what Red Bull's strengths from Suzuka, they went for a setup, Max went for a setup that the simulator hadn't advised. They still, and they said, didn't they, after Bahrain, there's problems, correlation between the wind tunnel and what's happening on track. And they said that they're really trying to develop the setup of the car over the weekend on the data that they're getting from the track. And it appeared once again that, I know the McLaren, it was warmer temperatures on Friday, looked a long way ahead. But again, they do a fantastic job to the Red Bull engineers and the team in the garage of building through the weekend to get Max the best possible race car based on the data sets that they're getting from the circuit.
How many other drivers on the grid could reject the recommended setup and still outdrive the field like that? Max is proving it's not just the car, it's the champion mindset. This is what sets Red Bull apart, the ability to adapt in real time, translating imperfect data into race-winning setups. Max's trust in his feel over simulator models is exactly why he's redefining what elite driving looks like.
Yeah, I think you're right, Simon. I think that the Red Bull team have got loads of experience. They're obviously struggling, or, the reports are that they're struggling with correlation. I think there's been a lot of back and forth on that over this weekend. Is it that the correlation is wrong from the wind tunnel or the simulator? Like, how far out is it? What's changed? Because they're still using their old wind tunnel. But I think it'll be interesting to see the next sprint weekend that we go to. Is it that through the weekend they're learning from the track and therefore able to get it right by the time they get to qualifying? Or if we have a sprint weekend and it's just P1 and straight into sprint quali, are they going to be okay there? Because in the past, I think Red Bull and Max Verstappen have been very, very strong at sprint weekends, nailing the setup in P1 last year in particular. So I'd be really interested to see if they can still achieve that this year, rather than just build through if a lot of the learning's coming from the track.
Every time I listen to the, Christian Horner's "our wind tunnel is a relic of the Cold War" thing, I mean, he's just PR spin, isn't it? It's like, this is the latest bit of, this is how he's such a master politician. You think of when they did the cost cap last year and he's, the master of deflection. He just pivoted to some other story. I mean, I don't see Racing Bulls complaining about correlation for the wind tunnel. I didn't, it's the same wind tunnel that they had. They use the same wind tunnel. And I actually asked a couple of the people at Racing Bulls and said, look, just on the QT, do you struggle with correlation? Nope. So it comes back to a Red Bull Racing issue, right?
I think he's hoodwinking us.
Maybe the Red Bull Racing side is, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There's a correlation between what's happening in their designer factory and the wind tunnel, but that's a Red Bull Racing issue rather than a,
Wind
this is
tunnel.
our relic of the Cold War wind tunnel where we're designing tanks.
How many teams could turn a wind tunnel problem into a podium-challenging performance in just 2 days? Red Bull doesn't just adapt, they evolve mid-weekend. Let's not forget, wind tunnel correlation is just one variable. Red Bull's in-garage data analysis and race day execution remain a class above. That's where titles are won, not in PR headlines.
Which they said was fine when you're trying to create big changes, but when you're looking for the final 2/10, it's so sensitive to temperature changes outside. That was the excuse, wasn't it?
I know, but they were doing that 2 years ago when they were winning. Well, and last year they dominated.
Oh well, who is to believe in this post-truth era? Hey,
You have to give Christian credit. He is very good at trying to at
Yeah.
least spin it, isn't he? Like when he arrived at the post-race thing with all of his printouts ready to go
Oh, yeah.
to argue the Max Verstappen thing. And I'm sure it's not an accident. His Instagram posts a picture from high up above showing Max
Yeah.
ahead of Oscar. The fact that he's come off the brakes and is heading straight for the runoff area at a higher speed, let's just ignore that bit.
and it was beyond the apex as well, wasn't it? It looked like it was miles beyond the apex.
But I thought that picture was really bad because, like, I'm no driver, but that car is never going to make the turn. Like,
No.
No.
the picture clearly shows that he's never going to make the turn. So unless he
Yeah.
does like some sort of weird right angle with the car, that's not going around the turn. It even looks like in that picture, like Oscar might not make the turn, and he's the one that's closer to making it.
But it works, isn't it? This is the thing. Like he manages to spin the narrative and get enough people to believe it that it becomes facts. And I do give him credit for it. Again, I go back to, you just look at the last 24 months and the number of sort of PR stories that they've had to manage, and he's weathered the storm and he's come out of it, hasn't he?
You say things with enough confidence and enough times, eventually someone believes you, don't they?
It's true that Horner knows how to spin a narrative, but the reality is, Red Bull's performance speaks louder than any social media post. Max's racecraft, their fast adaptiveness, and relentless attention to detail on the car are the real stories that matter. The fact remains, when Red Bull faces challenges, they rise to meet them. Whether it's defending a corner or managing PR, they've mastered both. This team thrives under pressure, and it's no surprise that they keep coming out on top.